Seven-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton thought he had achieved every dream possible on the racetrack. Then Hollywood came calling with an offer that would change his life forever. What started as a simple phone call from legendary producer Jerry Bruckheimer about helping Brad Pitt make the ultimate F1 movie became something far bigger than Lewis ever imagined. But this isn't just a story about a racing driver becoming a movie star. This is the incredible, true story of how a father's 21-year-old secret plan created opportunities for dreams his son didn't even know he had. A story of hidden cameras, secret screen tests, and a $50 million revelation that would transform Lewis from champion driver to Hollywood powerhouse. From the glittering streets of Monaco to the studio lots of Los Angeles, from childhood memories in Stevenage to red carpet premieres. This is the emotional journey of a man who discovered that some dreams are worth waiting a lifetime to achieve. The most amazing part? It all began with a single phone call that Lewis almost didn't answer. Lewis Hamilton sat on his white leather couch in his Monaco apartment. The sun was setting over the Mediterranean Sea. He could see expensive boats in the harbor below. His body still felt tired from yesterday's race at Silverstone Circuit. The British Grand Prix had been amazing. He won his home race for the 9th time. Lewis looked at his 7 championship trophies on the shelf. They sparkled in the golden sunlight. Each trophy brought back memories. The first one from 2008 made him think of his dad, Anthony, crying with joy. The newest one from 2023 reminded him he was still the best driver in the world at 38 years old. His phone rang. The sound broke the quiet in his apartment. Lewis saw a number he didn't know. He almost didn't answer it. Racing drivers get calls from strange people all the time, but something told him to pick up. "Hello, this is Lewis," he said. "Lewis Hamilton. This is Jerry Bruckheimer, the movie producer." The voice sounded excited and out of breath. Lewis sat up straight. Everyone knew Jerry Bruckheimer. He made Top Gun and Pirates of the Caribbean. Those were some of Lewis's favorite movies. He used to watch Top Gun with his dad when he was little. "Mr. Bruckheimer? Really?" Lewis couldn't believe it. "Yes, really. And please call me Jerry. I'm calling because I need your help with something big. Something that could change your life." Lewis walked to his window. A helicopter flew by carrying rich people to dinner. Monaco was full of famous people, but Lewis had never gotten a call from someone this famous in Hollywood. "What kind of help?" Lewis asked. "I'm making a Formula One movie with Apple Studios. We're spending $300 million on it. Brad Pitt is the star. He's going to play an old F1 driver who comes back to racing." Lewis's heart started beating faster. Brad Pitt. He remembered watching Fight Club as a teenager in Stevenage. Brad Pitt was so cool in that movie. Lewis never thought he would meet someone like that. "That sounds amazing, Jerry. But why are you calling me?" "Because we need you, Lewis. We need someone who knows F1 racing better than anyone else. We want you to help us make this movie look real. Brad Pitt specifically asked for you." Lewis almost dropped his phone. Brad Pitt asked for him? Lewis Hamilton from Stevenage? The same kid who used to pretend to be a movie star in his bedroom mirror? "Brad Pitt knows who I am," Lewis asked. Jerry laughed. "Lewis, you're one of the most famous athletes in the world. Brad has been watching you race since 2007. He thinks you're incredible." Lewis looked at his reflection in the window. He was wearing his usual style, ripped jeans and a bright yellow shirt. His braids were pulled back. He looked like a racing driver, not a movie star. But maybe that was about to change. "What would I have to do?" Lewis asked. "Come to Los Angeles next week. Meet Brad and our director Joseph Kosinski. He made Top Gun, Maverick. Look at our movie cars. Help us understand how real F1 drivers think and feel. We want this movie to be perfect." Lewis had always loved movies. When he was 8 years old, his dad took him to see Rush, about the F1 drivers Niki Lauda and James Hunt. Lewis dreamed that someday someone would make a movie about him. But helping make a movie about F1 with Brad Pitt? That seemed even better. "This sounds like a dream come true, Jerry. But can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why me?" "There are other F1 drivers who could help you. Some of them are retired and have more time." Jerry was quiet for a moment. Lewis could hear voices in the background. Jerry was probably in a meeting room full of important Hollywood people. "Lewis, let me be honest with you. You're not just the best driver in the world. You're also someone who understands stories. You know how to make people feel things. That's what movies are about. making people feel. Lewis thought about all the times he talked to reporters after races. He always tried to say things that would inspire kids watching at home. Maybe Jerry was right. Maybe Lewis did understand stories. "I'll do it, Jerry. When do you want me in?" "Los Angeles. Next Tuesday. I'll send a private jet to pick you up in Monaco. We'll put you up at the Beverly Hills Hotel." "This is going to be incredible, Lewis." After they hung up, Lewis sat back down on his couch. He looked at his championship trophies again. They had brought him fame and money and respect. But they had never brought him to Hollywood. Lewis picked up his phone to call his dad, Anthony. He always called his dad with big news. But then he stopped. Something in Jerry's voice seemed strange at the end of the call, like Jerry was hiding something important. Lewis put his phone down and walked to his kitchen. He made a cup of tea with milk, the way his mom Carmen taught him. As he stirred the tea, he wondered what Jerry wasn't telling him. Why did Jerry really want Lewis Hamilton in Hollywood? The sun had set completely now. Monaco sparkled with lights. From restaurants and casinos, Lewis looked out at the night sky and smiled. In 1 week, he would be in Los Angeles working with Brad Pitt. Maybe this was the start of something bigger than racing. But deep down, Lewis felt like there was a secret waiting for him in Hollywood. Something Jerry Bruckheimer knew but wasn't ready to tell him yet. Lewis finished his tea and went to bed. Tomorrow he would start getting ready for the biggest adventure of his life. An adventure that started with a phone call from the most famous movie producer in the world. As he closed his eyes, Lewis wondered if his life was about to change forever. He had no idea how right he was. 1 week later, Lewis stepped off the private jet at Los Angeles International Airport. The California sun felt different from Monaco's sunshine. It was brighter and warmer, like it was promising something special. Paparazzi photographers were waiting at the airport. They had found out somehow that Lewis was coming to Hollywood. Camera flashes went off like fireworks. "Lewis, Lewis, are you making a movie?" they shouted. Lewis smiled and waved, but didn't stop walking. He wore his favorite ripped jeans and a purple shirt with small diamonds on it. A black Mercedes car waited for him outside. The driver was a friendly man named Miguel who had been driving movie stars around Los Angeles for 20 years. "Welcome to Hollywood, Mr. Hamilton," Miguel said with a big smile. "You're going to love it here." As they drove through the city, Lewis looked out the window at palm trees and huge billboards. One billboard showed Brad Pitt advertising expensive watches. Lewis couldn't believe he was about to meet the man on that billboard. They pulled up to Sony Pictures Studios in Culver City. Lewis had seen this place in movies, but never thought he would actually go inside. A security guard checked Lewis's name on a list and gave him a visitor badge. "Have a great day, Mr. Hamilton," the guard said. Jerry Bruckheimer met Lewis at the front gate. Jerry was 80 years old, but still looked strong and excited about movies. He wore a baseball cap and a black jacket. "Lewis, you made it. Are you ready to see some movie magic?" They walked through the studio lot together. Lewis saw huge buildings that looked like airplane hangars. "Those are sound stages," Jerry explained. "We build whole worlds inside them." Lewis peeked through an open door and saw people building what looked like a spaceship. "Each one of these buildings costs millions of dollars to run," Jerry said. "But when you see the movie, you forget you're looking at something fake. That's what we want to do with our F1 movie. Make people forget they're not watching real racing." They walked past a fake New York City street. It looked completely real, but Lewis could see it was just painted walls and fake windows. "This is incredible," Lewis said. "It's like a giant playground for adults." Jerry laughed. "That's exactly what it is. And Brad Pitt is one of our best players." They arrived at a building with a sign that said Production Office B. Jerry opened the door and Lewis followed him inside. The office was bigger than Lewis's apartment in Monaco. There were movie posters on the walls and awards on shelves. A huge table was covered with pictures of F1 cars and racetracks. "Lewis Hamilton," a voice called out. Lewis turned around and saw Brad Pitt walking toward him. Brad was 60 years old but still looked like a movie star. His hair was perfectly messy and he wore a simple white t-shirt and dark jeans. He looked exactly like he did in the movies, but somehow more real. "Brad," Lewis said, trying not to sound too excited. They shook hands. Brad's handshake was firm and warm. "Lewis, I've been watching you race since you started in 2007. You're incredible. That race you won at Silverstone last week. I watched it live at 5 in the morning Los Angeles time. Lewis couldn't believe Brad Pitt woke up early to watch him race. Thank you, Brad. I've been watching your movies since I was a kid. Fight Club is one of my favorites. Brad smiled. That's a good one. But wait until you see what we're going to make together. They sat down at the big table. Jerry spread out papers with drawings of race cars and movie cameras. Let me tell you about our movie, Brad said. I play Sonny Hayes, a Formula One driver who raced in the 1990s. He gets into a bad crash and stops racing for 30 years. Then he decides to come back and race against drivers who are young enough to be his sons. Lewis nodded. He had heard of older drivers trying to come back to F1. It was almost impossible because the sport moved so fast. What team does he drive for? That's the interesting part, Jerry said. He starts his own team with his best friend. They have no money and old equipment, but they have heart and experience. Lewis liked this story. It reminded him of his own early days in racing when his dad sold everything to buy him better go-karts. It sounds like a story about never giving up on your dreams. Exactly, Brad said. And that's why we need you, Lewis. You know what it feels like to have impossible dreams. You grew up in a small town in England and became the greatest F1 driver ever. Sonny Hayes is doing the same thing, just later in life. They walked to another building where the movie car workshop was set up. Lewis saw 6 Formula One cars that looked almost real. But when he got closer, he could see they were different from real F1 cars. Lewis walked around one of the cars and touched the steering wheel. It was too big. Real F1 steering wheels were smaller and had more buttons. He looked at the pedals. They were in the wrong place. Real F1 drivers had their feet very close together. These cars look great from far away, Lewis said carefully. But if you want them to look real on camera, we need to change some things. Brad and Jerry looked at each other. What kind of changes? Jerry asked. Lewis pointed to different parts of the car. The steering wheel needs to be smaller. The pedals need to move closer together. The seat needs to be lower. And the mirrors are too big. Brad got into one of the cars. He looked uncomfortable. Lewis, this feels nothing like what I imagined. Can you show me how a real F1 driver sits? Lewis helped Brad adjust the seat and showed him how to hold the steering wheel. F1 drivers don't sit up straight like in normal cars. We lean back and keep our arms bent, and we never move our heads much because of the G-forces. Brad tried the new position. This is much better. I can see why you need to be in perfect shape to do this. They spent 2 hours going through every detail of the movie cars. Lewis showed them how F1 drivers got in and out of cars, how they held their helmets, how they talked on the radio. Every little thing mattered for making the movie look real. As the sun started to set, Jerry walked Lewis back to his car. Lewis, you've been incredible today. You know more about F1 than anyone, but you also understand what makes good movies. That's a rare combination. Lewis felt proud, but also curious. Jerry, can I ask you something? How did you know I would be good at this? I've never worked on a movie before. Jerry stopped walking and looked at Lewis. For a moment, his face looked different, like he was thinking about something he couldn't say. Lewis, sometimes you just know when someone is special. You have something that goes beyond racing. You have the ability to make people believe in stories. Lewis wanted to ask more questions, but Jerry was already opening the car door. Miguel will take you back to your hotel. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the real work. As the car drove away from Sony Picture Studios, Lewis looked back at the movie lot. He could see lights on in the buildings where people were working late to make movies. His phone buzzed with a text from his dad, Anthony. How was your first day in Hollywood, son? Lewis smiled and typed back, amazing, Dad. But I think there's more to this than they're telling me. He was right. But Lewis had no idea just how much more there was to discover. Lewis woke up early the next morning at the Beverly Hills Hotel. His room had a perfect view of the Hollywood Hills. He could see the famous Hollywood sign in the distance. As a kid, in Stevenage, he never imagined he would wake up to this view. After breakfast, Miguel picked him up in the same black Mercedes. Ready for day 2, Mr. Hamilton? Miguel asked with a smile. More ready than yesterday, Lewis said. I think I'm starting to understand how movies work. When they arrived at Sony Pictures Studios, Lewis felt more comfortable. The security guard remembered him and waved. Good morning, movie star, the guard joked. Jerry Bruckheimer was waiting with a tall man wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. Lewis, meet Joseph Kosinski. He's our director. Joseph shook Lewis's hand firmly. I directed Top Gun: Maverick. I know how to make vehicles look fast and dangerous on screen. But F1 cars are different from fighter jets. I need your help." They walked to a new building Lewis hadn't seen before. Inside were dozens of cameras of different sizes. Some cameras were as small as cell phones. Others were as big as refrigerators. "These are our racing cameras," Joseph explained. "This little one can film at 300 miles per hour without braking. This big one can show every drop of sweat on Brad's face while he's driving." Lewis picked up one of the small cameras. It was heavier than it looked. "Where do you put these during races?" "Everywhere," Joseph said excitedly. "Inside the cars, on the cars, next to the track, above the track. We want people to feel like they're sitting in the car with Brad." They spent an hour looking at different cameras. Joseph showed Lewis videos from other racing movies. Some looked fake and some looked real. "What makes the difference?" Joseph asked. Lewis studied the videos carefully. The fake ones show the cars from impossible angles. Real F1 cars move too fast for cameras to follow perfectly, and the sound is wrong. Real F1 engines don't sound like motorcycles. Joseph wrote notes on his iPad. "What else?" "The drivers look wrong in the fake movies. Real F1 drivers don't move their heads much. We can't look around like we're driving on a normal road. Everything happens too fast." They walked outside to a parking lot where the movie F1 cars were waiting. Today there were also real stunt drivers standing next to the cars. Lewis recognized some of them from action movies he had watched. "These are our stunt drivers," Jerry said. "They're the best in Hollywood, but they don't know F1 racing." Lewis shook hands with each stunt driver. They were all friendly and excited to learn. The head stunt driver was a woman named Maria Santos. She had driven cars in Fast and Furious movies. "Lewis, we've been practicing with these F1 cars for 2 weeks, Maria said. "But something doesn't feel right. Can you help us?" Lewis got into one of the movie cars. Yesterday, he had fixed the steering wheel and pedals. Today, the car felt much better. He started the engine and drove slowly around the parking lot. The other stunt drivers watched carefully. Lewis showed them how to take corners smoothly. "F1 drivers don't jerk the steering wheel," he explained. "We make small, smooth movements. The car does most of the work." He drove faster around the parking lot. The movie car couldn't go as fast as a real F1 car, but it was still quick. Lewis felt the familiar feeling of speed and control. It reminded him of his first time in a go-kart when he was 8 years old. Lewis stopped the car and got out. "Who wants to try first?" Maria got in the car. Lewis sat in the passenger seat they had added for training. "Remember, smooth movements. Feel the car, don't fight it." Maria drove around the parking lot. At first, she was too rough with the steering wheel, but after a few laps, she started to understand. "This is completely different from stunt driving," she said. "It's more like dancing than fighting." Lewis smiled. "That's exactly right. F1 racing is like dancing at 200 miles per hour. Each stunt driver took turns with Lewis in the passenger seat. He taught them how to brake late and accelerate out of corners. He showed them how to keep their hands steady and their heads still. After lunch, Joseph took Lewis to see how they would film the racing scenes. They drove to a small racetrack in the California desert. The track wasn't as famous as Monaco or Silverstone, but it had good corners for filming. "We'll film here for 2 weeks, Joseph said. "Then we'll go to real F1 tracks during race weekends." Lewis looked at the track layout. It had tight corners and long straight sections. "This will look good on camera, but you need to put cameras in the right places." They walked around the track together. Lewis pointed to different corners. "Put a camera here to show the cars braking. Put one here to show them accelerating. And put one up high to show the whole track." Joseph made marks on a map of the track. "Lewis, you think like a filmmaker. Have you ever thought about directing movies?" Lewis laughed. "I can barely direct my own life sometimes." But inside, Lewis felt excited. He was good at this. Understanding cameras and angles came naturally to him. Maybe Jerry was right when he said Lewis understood stories. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning camera positions. Lewis suggested places Joseph hadn't thought of. "What about putting a camera inside the car pointing at the driver's feet?" Lewis said. "People never see how fast we move our feet on the pedals." "That's brilliant," Joseph said. "We'll need a special small camera for that." As the sun started to set, they drove back to the studio. Lewis felt tired but excited. This was completely different from racing, but it used some of the same skills. Attention to detail, understanding speed and movement. Knowing what would look good and what wouldn't. At the studio, Jerry was waiting with more paperwork. Lewis, we need you to sign some contracts. You're officially our F1 consultant now. Lewis read through the contracts. The money was good, but that wasn't what excited him. What excited him was seeing his name on official Hollywood paperwork. Lewis Hamilton, technical consultant. Jerry, can I ask you something? Lewis said as he signed the papers. Of course. Why? Did you really pick me for this? I mean, there are other F1 drivers who could help you. Sebastian Vettel just retired. Fernando Alonso has more experience than me. Jerry looked at Lewis for a long moment. Again, Lewis saw that strange expression on Jerry's face, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Lewis, you're not just a great driver. You're someone who sees the big picture. You understand how to make people feel things. That's what movies are about. Lewis wanted to ask more questions, but Jerry was already walking away. See you tomorrow, Lewis. We start filming at the track. As Miguel drove Lewis back to his hotel, Lewis thought about the day. He had enjoyed every minute of it. Working with cameras and teaching stunt drivers felt natural and fun, but he still felt like Jerry was hiding something important. Why did Jerry always change the subject when Lewis asked direct questions? What was Jerry not telling him? Lewis looked out at the Los Angeles traffic. Expensive cars were everywhere. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, McLarens. In Monaco, these cars were normal. But here in Hollywood, they felt different. Like props in a movie about rich and famous people. Maybe that's what Lewis was becoming. A prop in someone else's movie. But whose movie? And what was his real role in it? Lewis had a feeling he would find out soon. But he also had a feeling the answer would surprise him more than anything he could imagine. 3 months had passed since Lewis first arrived in Hollywood. He now felt like part of the movie team. Every morning, Miguel picked him up from his new apartment in West Hollywood. Lewis had decided to stay longer than planned because he loved the work so much. The filming was going better than anyone expected. Brad Pitt looked like a real F1 driver now. The stunt drivers could handle the movie cars perfectly. And Lewis had become the person everyone asked when they had questions about racing. On this particular Tuesday morning, Lewis sat in his trailer at the desert racetrack. His trailer was smaller than Brad's, but still bigger than his childhood bedroom in Stevenage. It had a couch, a desk, and a small kitchen. Pictures of his family were on the walls. Lewis opened his laptop to check his emails while he waited for the next scene. Most emails were from his racing team Mercedes, talking about next season's car. Some were from fashion companies wanting him to wear their clothes. But one email caught his attention. The email was from Apple Studios. It was sent to Jerry Bruckheimer, but somehow Lewis got a copy by mistake. The subject line said Project Mirror Status Update. Lewis had never heard of Project Mirror before. He almost deleted the email, but something made him read it instead. Jerry, the email said, we're very happy with how Lewis is working out. He's even better with cameras than we hoped. His acting in the small scenes is natural and believable. We think he's ready for the next phase of Project Mirror. Lewis felt confused. Acting? What small scenes? He thought back over the past 3 months. Sometimes Jerry and Joseph asked him to stand in certain places while they tested camera angles. Sometimes they asked him to pretend to talk on a race car radio. But Lewis thought that was just helping with the movie. That he kept reading the email. Lewis doesn't know we're testing him yet. We want to keep it that way until we're sure he can handle the big reveal. His screen tests are impressive. The Apple executives think he has movie star potential. Lewis's heart started beating fast. Screen tests? Movie star potential? What was really happening here? The email continued. We should tell Lewis about Project Mirror soon. He's starting to ask more questions about why we picked him. But we need to wait until we finish the secret footage of him acting. Once we have enough material, we can make our official offer. Lewis read the email 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. Apple Studios wasn't just using him to help make Brad Pitt's movie. They were secretly testing him to see if he could be a movie star himself. Lewis closed his laptop and sat back on his couch. His mind was spinning with questions. How long had they been filming him without him knowing? What kind of movie did they want him to star in? Why didn't they just ask him directly? But the biggest question was, did Lewis want to be a movie star? Lewis thought about his childhood in Stevenage. He remembered acting in school plays when he was 10 years old. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, always said he was good at making people believe his characters were real. Lewis used to practice acting in his bedroom mirror, pretending to be heroes from movies. But then he discovered go-kart racing, and acting became just a childhood memory. Racing became his whole life. Lewis worked for 20 years to become the best F1 driver in the world. Could he really start over in a completely different career? Lewis heard a knock on his trailer door. "Lewis, we're ready for you," called Maria Santos, the head stunt driver. "Coming," Lewis replied. He put his laptop away and tried to act normal. But inside, his mind was still racing with thoughts about Project Mirror. Outside his trailer, the film crew was setting up for a big scene. Brad Pitt was already in his racing suit, talking to Joseph Kosinski about camera angles. When Brad saw Lewis, he waved and smiled. "Lewis, perfect timing. We need you to help with this scene." Lewis walked over to Brad and Joseph. "What do you need me to do?" "We're filming the scene where my character crashes during practice," Brad explained. "I need to look scared but also angry. Can you show me how real F1 drivers react to crashes?" Lewis thought about the crashes he had seen in his career. His friend Jules Bianchi crashed in Japan in 2014 and never recovered. Lewis remembered feeling helpless and sad, but he also remembered his own crashes, like the one in Brazil in 2007. He felt angry at himself, but also determined to get back in the car. "Real crashes bring up lots of different feelings," Lewis told Brad. "Fear, anger, sadness, but also determination. You have to show all of those feelings in your face." Brad nodded and got into the movie car. Lewis stood behind the cameras with Jerry and Joseph. He watched Brad act out the crash scene. Brad's face showed exactly the right emotions. He looked like a real F1 driver who had just crashed. "Cut. That was perfect," Joseph shouted. Lewis clapped with everyone else. But as he watched Brad get out of the car, Lewis realized something. Brad was acting, but Lewis's emotions during the scene were real. The cameras had been filming Lewis's face while he watched Brad perform. Lewis looked around and saw several cameras pointed at him, not at Brad. They had been secretly filming his reactions. This was another screen test for Project Mirror. Lewis felt a mix of excitement and anger. He was excited because it meant Apple Studios really thought he could be an actor, but he was angry because they were testing him without telling him. Jerry walked over to Lewis. "Great work today, Lewis. You really helped Brad understand that scene." Lewis looked directly into Jerry's eyes. "Jerry, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you think I could ever be an actor? Not just helping other actors, but actually starring in movies myself?" Jerry's face changed. He looked surprised and a little nervous. "Why do you ask, Lewis?" "Just curious. I used to act in school, plays when I was a kid. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I chose acting instead of racing." Jerry was quiet for a moment. Lewis could see him thinking carefully about what to say. "Lewis, I think you could do anything you set your mind to. You have a natural ability to make people believe in what you're doing. That's the most important part of acting." Lewis wanted to tell Jerry about the email he had seen. He wanted to ask about Project Mirror directly, but something told him to wait. Maybe it was better to let Jerry and Apple Studios think their secret was still safe. "Thanks, Jerry. That means a lot coming from you." That evening, Lewis sat in his apartment looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. The city sparkled with millions of lights. Somewhere in those lights were movie studios where people made dreams come true every day. Lewis picked up his phone to call his dad, Anthony. He always talked to his dad when he had big decisions to make. "Hello, son. How's Hollywood treating you?" "Dad, can I ask you something? What would you do if someone offered you your dream job, but they lied about how they offered it to you?" Anthony was quiet for a moment. "That's a tough one, Lewis. Can you tell me more?" Lewis wanted to tell his dad everything about Project Mirror, but he wasn't sure if he should. Let's say someone wants to give you an amazing opportunity, but instead of asking you directly, they trick you into proving you deserve it. Anthony said thoughtfully. "Well, son, sometimes good things come to us in strange ways. The important question isn't how the opportunity came to you. The important question is, do you want it?" Lewis looked at his reflection in the window. He saw a 38-year-old man who had achieved everything he ever dreamed of in racing. But maybe it was time for new dreams. "Dad, what if I told you I might want to try acting?" Anthony laughed. "Lewis, I remember when you were 10 years old. You used to act out entire movies in the living room. Your mother and I always wondered if you'd go back to acting someday." Lewis smiled. His parents had seen something in him that he had forgotten about himself. "Thanks, Dad. I think I know what I need to do." After they hung up, Lewis made a decision. He would let Apple Studios continue their secret testing, but he would also start preparing for the moment when they revealed Project Mirror. He would be ready to say yes to the biggest opportunity of his life. Lewis didn't know it yet, but that moment was coming sooner than he thought. 2 weeks after Lewis discovered the Project Mirror email, the movie team packed up their equipment in California. They were flying to Monaco for the most important part of filming. The Monaco Grand Prix was happening in 3 days, and Jerry wanted to film Brad Pitt's racing scenes during the real race weekend. Lewis felt excited but nervous as their plane landed in Nice, France. Monaco was his second home. He had an apartment there and knew every corner of the famous street circuit. But bringing Hollywood cameras to his racing world felt strange. It was like mixing 2 parts of his life that had never touched before. The movie team stayed at the Hotel Hermitage, one of the most expensive hotels in Monaco. Lewis stayed at his own apartment just 5 minutes away. As he unpacked his clothes, he looked out at the Mediterranean Sea. In 3 days, he would be racing here for Mercedes while also helping film Brad Pitt's movie. It would be the busiest weekend of his life. The next morning, Lewis met the film crew at the Monte Carlo circuit. The track was already busy with F1 teams setting up their garages. Mechanics were working on real race cars while movie cameras rolled past them. "This is incredible," Brad Pitt said as he walked through the paddock wearing sunglasses and a racing suit. "I feel like I'm really part of Formula One." Joseph Kosinski was directing camera crews around the track. "Lewis, we need you to show us the best places to film. Where do the cars look most exciting?" Lewis had raced at Monaco 17 times. He knew every inch of the 2.1-mile street circuit. "Follow me," he said. They walked to Casino Corner, the most famous turn in Formula One. Lewis pointed to different spots around the corner. "Put a camera here to show the cars turning. Put one up high to show the whole harbor. And put one low too. Show how close the cars come to the barriers." Joseph marked each camera position on his map. "What about sound? Where do the engines sound best?" "Right here," Lewis said, standing next to the metal barriers. When F1 cars go by at 180 miles per hour, the sound hits these barriers and echoes. It's like thunder. They spent the morning walking around the entire track. Lewis showed them the swimming pool section where cars flew over a small hill. He showed them the tunnel where engines echoed off concrete walls. And he showed them the start-finish straight where cars reached their highest speeds. "Lewis, you know this track like a musician knows a song," Brad said. "Every note, every rhythm." Lewis smiled. "Monaco is special. It's the most difficult track in Formula One. One small mistake, and you hit the wall. But when you get it right, it feels like flying." During lunch, Jerry pulled Lewis aside. "We need to talk about tomorrow's filming schedule. During the real practice sessions, we'll film you working with your Mercedes team. We want to show how real F1 drivers prepare for races." Lewis nodded. This seemed normal. But then Jerry said something that made Lewis's heart skip. "We also want to film you in some dramatic scenes. Maybe you talking to cameras about racing. Maybe you walking through the paddock looking serious. Just some extra footage for behind-the-scenes content." Lewis knew this wasn't for behind-the-scenes content. This was more secret filming for Project Mirror. But he played along. "Sure, Jerry. Whatever you need." That afternoon, the real F1 teams started practicing on the track. Lewis put on his Mercedes racing suit and helmet. For a moment, he forgot about cameras and movies. He was just Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, getting ready to race. But as he walked to his car, he noticed movie cameras following him. Joseph Kosinski was directing cameramen to film Lewis from different angles. "Just act natural," Joseph called out. "Pretend we're not here." Lewis got into his Mercedes and drove out onto the Monaco circuit. The familiar feeling of speed and precision took over his mind. He hit his marks perfectly through Casino Corner. He flew through the swimming pool section. He rocketed through the tunnel at 160 miles per hour, but something felt different today. Lewis kept thinking about the cameras filming him. Was this really practice for the Mercedes team? Or was this another screen test for Apple Studios? After practice, Lewis sat in the Mercedes garage, taking off his helmet. His race engineer Pete Bonington was reviewing data on computer screens. "Good session, Lewis. The car feels strong for qualifying tomorrow." Lewis nodded, but he was watching the movie cameras positioned around the garage. They were filming everything. Lewis talking to his engineers, Lewis drinking water, Lewis looking at his phone. This was definitely not normal behind the scenes footage. Suddenly, one of the movie cameras made a loud noise and stopped working. A cameraman named Dave started hitting buttons, trying to fix it. "I can't get it working," Dave said to Joseph. "We need that camera for the big scene tomorrow," Joseph said, looking worried. "Without it, we can't film the dramatic crash sequence properly." Lewis overheard their conversation. "What crash sequence?" Joseph looked uncomfortable. "Oh, just some scenes with stunt cars. Nothing dangerous." But Jerry walked over with a serious expression. "Actually, Lewis, we have a problem. One of our stunt drivers got sick this morning. He can't drive tomorrow during the real race weekend." Lewis felt confused. "What does that have to do with me? We need someone who can drive the movie car safely during the real F1 action. You're the only person here who can handle both the movie car and the real racing traffic." Lewis looked around the garage. There were 50 people from the film crew waiting for his answer. Cameras were rolling, filming his reaction. The movie was costing Apple Studios $50,000 every hour they weren't filming. "You want me to drive the movie car during the real Monaco Grand Prix weekend?" Lewis asked. "Just during practice sessions," Jerry said quickly. "When the real F1 cars aren't on track. It would only take 2 hours." Lewis thought about it. Driving the movie car at Monaco would be fun, and it would help the film crew stay on schedule. But something felt wrong about the timing. Why did this problem happen right when they were filming at his home race? "What kind of scenes are you filming?" Lewis asked. Brad Pitt stepped forward. "Scenes where my character drives through Monaco alone, thinking about his comeback. Very emotional, very personal. We need someone who understands what it feels like to race here." Lewis looked at Brad's face. Brad seemed honest and genuine. This didn't feel like a trick. Maybe the stunt driver really was sick. "Okay," Lewis said. "I'll do it. But I want to see the movie car first. I need to make sure it's safe." The film crew cheered and started setting up equipment. Lewis walked over to look at the movie car they had brought to Monaco. It was painted to look like Brad's character's race car, blue and white with number 50. Lewis got into the driver's seat. The car felt familiar now after months of working with it in California. The steering wheel was the right size. The pedals were in the right position. The seat felt comfortable. "This car is much better than when I first saw it," Lewis told the crew. "You've made good changes." Joseph Kosinski smiled. "We learned from the best teacher." As Lewis got out of the car, he noticed something strange. The car had multiple cameras mounted inside it, more cameras than needed for a simple driving scene. There were cameras pointed at the driver's face, hands, and feet. There was even a camera pointed at the driver's eyes. Lewis realized this wasn't just about helping Brad Pitt's movie anymore. This was about filming Lewis Hamilton in a starring role. Tomorrow's driving scenes would be major footage for Project Mirror, but Lewis didn't say anything. He was ready to play the game until Apple Studios was ready to reveal their real plan. "See you tomorrow morning," Lewis told Jerry. "This should be interesting." Jerry smiled, but Lewis could see nervousness in his eyes. Tomorrow would be the biggest test yet, and Lewis was ready to pass it with flying colors. As Lewis walked back to his apartment that evening, he passed crowds of F1 fans walking through Monaco's streets. They were wearing Mercedes shirts with his name and number. Some fans recognized him and asked for pictures. "Lewis, are you going to win on Sunday?" a young girl asked. Lewis smiled and signed her hat. "I'm going to try my best." But as he walked away, Lewis thought about the girl's question. Winning on Sunday was important, but tomorrow's movie filming might be even more important for his future. Lewis was about to become a movie star, whether Apple Studios was ready to admit it or not. The next morning, Lewis woke up at 6 a.m. in his Monaco apartment. The sun was shining over the Mediterranean Sea. It was a perfect day for racing and filming. Lewis made his usual breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast with tea and milk. But his stomach felt nervous. Today would be different from any other race weekend. Lewis walked to the Monte Carlo circuit at 7 a.m. The streets were already busy with F1 fans wearing team shirts and carrying cameras. Monaco during Grand Prix weekend felt like a festival where the whole world came to watch cars go very fast in a very small space to the track. Lewis saw the movie crew setting up equipment everywhere. There were cameras on tall poles, cameras on moving carts, and cameras hanging from helicopters. Joseph Kosinski was talking into a headset, coordinating with cameramen around the circuit. "Lewis, perfect timing. Jerry Bruckheimer called out. Jerry was wearing a Monaco Grand Prix cap and looked more excited than Lewis had ever seen him. Ready for the big day? Lewis asked. More than ready. But first, there are some people who want to meet you. Jerry led Lewis to a quiet area behind the Mercedes garage. 3 people in expensive business suits were standing there with iPads and serious expressions. Lewis recognized this type of person from his racing career, executives who made big decisions about lots of money. Lewis, meet the Apple Studios team, Jerry said. This is Sarah Chun, the vice president of film development. This is Marcus Rodriguez, the head of talent acquisition. And this is David Park, the executive producer for international projects. Lewis shook hands with each person. Their handshakes were firm and confident. These were people who were used to making deals worth millions of dollars. Mr. Hamilton, Sarah Chun said with a professional smile, we're very excited to watch you work today. We've heard incredible things about your natural ability with cameras. Lewis played along. Thank you. I'm just trying to help make the best movie possible. Marcus Rodriguez opened his iPad and started taking notes. We'll be observing how you handle different types of scenes, acting under pressure, showing emotions, working with other actors, just normal behind-the-scenes documentation. Lewis knew this wasn't normal documentation. These Apple executives had flown to Monaco specifically to evaluate him for Project Mirror. Today was the biggest screen test of his life, disguised as helping Brad Pitt's movie. I'll do my best, Lewis said simply. David Park nodded approvingly. We're sure you will. The first scene they filmed was Lewis walking through the Monaco paddock in his racing suit. Joseph directed him to look serious and focused, like a driver, preparing for the biggest race of his career. Think about everything you've sacrificed to get here, Joseph called out as cameras followed Lewis. Think about all the people who believe in you. Let us see that pressure on your face. Lewis didn't have to act. He really was thinking about his sacrifices. His childhood in Stevenage when his family had no money. His dad, Anthony, working 3 jobs to pay for go-kart racing. His mom, Carmen, crying when he left home at 13 to live with his racing team. All those memories were real, and they showed on his face. Cut. That was perfect, Joseph shouted. The Apple executives whispered to each other and wrote notes on their iPads. Lewis pretended not to notice, but he could feel them studying his every movement. Next, they filmed Lewis having a pretend conversation with Brad Pitt about racing strategy. The scene was supposed to show Brad's character getting advice from a current F1 driver. Remember, Brad, Lewis said, reading from a script, Monaco isn't about pure speed. It's about precision and patience. One mistake and your race is over. Brad nodded seriously. But what if I'm running out of time? What if this is my last chance to prove myself? Lewis looked directly into Brad's eyes. For a moment, he forgot. They were acting. Lewis was thinking about his own career. At 38 years old, how many more chances would he have to win championships? How many more years could he race at the highest level? Then you give everything you have, Lewis said with real emotion in his voice. You don't hold anything back, because regret is worse than failure. Cut, Joseph called out. But he didn't sound excited this time. He sounded amazed. Brad Pitt walked over to Lewis and put his hand on his shoulder. Lewis, that wasn't acting. That was truth. You were talking about your own life, weren't you? Lewis nodded. Sometimes the best acting comes from real feelings. The Apple executives were writing frantically on their iPads. Sarah Chin looked up at Lewis with new respect in her eyes. After lunch, they filmed the most challenging scene of the day. Lewis had to drive the movie car through the streets of Monaco, while cameras followed him from helicopters and on the ground. But this wasn't just driving. He had to act emotional while driving. The scene was supposed to show Brad's character having doubts about his comeback. Lewis had to drive slowly through Casino Corner while looking sad and uncertain. Then he had to accelerate out of the corner while looking determined and confident. This is hard, Lewis, Joseph explained. You have to show 2 different emotions in the same scene, and you have to do it while driving a race car. Lewis got into the movie car. The familiar feeling of sitting in a cockpit made him feel calm and focused. Multiple cameras inside the car were pointed at his face and hands. Ready when you are, Lewis said into his radio. Joseph's voice came through clearly. Action. Drive slowly through the corner and think about giving up on your dreams. Let us see that sadness. Lewis drove the movie car slowly through Casino Corner. He thought about the times in his career when he wanted to quit. In 2011, when he had a terrible season. In 2016, when his engines kept breaking. In 2021, when he lost the championship on the last lap of the last race. Those memories brought real tears to his eyes. The cameras captured every emotion on his face. "Now accelerate," Joseph called out. "Think about why you never gave up." Lewis pressed the accelerator and the car shot forward. He thought about his dad Anthony believing in him. He thought about his first win at the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2020. He thought about all the young kids who looked up to him. By the time he reached the end of the straight, Lewis was smiling with pure joy. The cameras had captured his complete emotional journey from sadness to determination. Cut. Incredible. Joseph was jumping up and down with excitement. Lewis got out of the car feeling exhausted but proud. Acting while driving was much harder than just driving fast. It required using his brain and his heart at the same time. The Apple executives surrounded Lewis immediately. "That was extraordinary," Sarah Chin said. "You have a natural ability to show complex emotions on camera. Have you ever considered professional acting?" This was the moment Lewis had been waiting for. The moment when Apple Studios would start revealing their real plan. "I used to act in school plays when I was a child," Lewis said carefully. "But I haven't thought about it seriously since then." Marcus Rodriguez smiled. "Well, maybe you should start thinking about it." David Park stepped forward. "Lewis, we'd like to have a private conversation with you after filming wraps today. There's something we want to discuss." Lewis felt his heart racing faster than when he drove at 200 miles per hour. "What kind of something?" "Your future," Sarah Chun said simply. "We think you might have a very interesting future ahead of you." As the sun began to set over Monaco, Lewis knew that everything was about to change. Tomorrow he would race in the Monaco Grand Prix as Lewis Hamilton, the F1 driver. But tonight, he might become Lewis Hamilton, the movie star. The real test was over. Now it was time for the real offer. That evening, Lewis sat in a quiet restaurant overlooking Monaco Harbor. The Apple Studios executives had asked him to dinner to discuss his future. Lewis ordered fish and vegetables, his usual healthy meal. But he was too nervous to eat much. Sarah Chin sat across from him, looking professional but friendly. "Lewis, before we talk about business, I want to say something personal. Watching you work today was incredible. You have a gift that goes beyond racing." Lewis sipped his water and nodded. "Thank you. But I'm curious. What exactly do you want to discuss?" Marcus Rodriguez opened his laptop on the table. "Lewis, we want to show you something that might surprise you." The laptop screen showed a video compilation. Lewis watched himself over the past 4 months, walking through the studio lot, teaching stunt drivers, talking to cameras, driving the movie car. But this wasn't behind-the-scenes footage. This was edited like a movie trailer, with dramatic music and professional lighting. "What is this?" Lewis asked, even though he already knew. "This is you, Lewis," David Park said. "This is footage from a secret project we've been working on. We call it Project Mirror." Lewis pretended to look confused. "I don't understand." Sarah leaned forward. "Lewis, we haven't been completely honest with you. Yes, we needed your help with Brad Pitt's F1 movie. But we also had another reason for bringing you to Hollywood." Lewis waited for her to continue. "We wanted to see if Lewis Hamilton could become Lewis Hamilton, the movie star." Marcus turned the laptop toward Lewis. "For the past 4 months, we've been secretly filming you, screen testing you, watching how you work with cameras, how you handle pressure, how you show emotions. You've passed every test." Lewis looked at the 3 executives. "So Brad Pitt's movie was just a way to trick me into auditioning?" "Not a trick," David said quickly. "Brad's movie is real and important. But it was also an opportunity to evaluate your potential. And Lewis, your potential is extraordinary." Sarah pulled out a thick folder. "We want to offer you something that could change your life. A 3-movie deal with Apple Studios. The first movie would be about your childhood in Stevenage. The second about your first championship in 2008. The third about your fight for equality in racing." Lewis's heart started beating fast. "You want to make movies about my life?" "We want you to star in movies about your life," Marcus corrected. "You would play yourself. We've never seen anything like your natural acting ability." Lewis looked at the contract Sarah had placed in front of him. The numbers were bigger than he expected. Much bigger. $50 million for 3 movies. Sarah said, plus percentage of profits, plus creative control over the scripts. Lewis, this could make you one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. Lewis stared at the contract. $50 million was more money than he made racing in 2 years. But money wasn't what made his hands shake as he held the papers. What made him shake was the dream. The dream of a 10-year-old boy in Stevenage who used to act out movie scenes in his bedroom. The dream he thought he had given up when he chose racing over everything else. "This is incredible," Lewis said honestly. "But I have to ask, why all the secrecy? Why didn't you just ask me directly 4 months ago?" The three executives looked at each other. Sarah answered first. "Because we weren't sure you could act. Racing drivers and movie stars use different skills. We needed to see if you could learn those skills." And Lewis asked, "You're better than we hoped," David said with a smile. "You're a natural." Lewis thought about everything that had happened since Jerry's first phone call. All the camera tests, all the secret filming, all the times he felt like people were watching him without telling him why. Part of him felt angry about the lies and manipulation, but part of him felt grateful for the opportunity. "Can I ask you something else?" Lewis said. "What happens to my racing career? I'm still competing for Mercedes. I still want to win more championships." Marcus nodded. "We've thought about that. The first movie would film during your off-season this winter. If it's successful, we could schedule the other movies around your racing calendar. We're not asking you to choose between racing and acting. We're asking you to do both." Lewis had never imagined he could have 2 careers at the same time. Racing had always been his whole life. But maybe his life could be bigger than racing. "How much time do I have to decide?" Lewis asked. "Take all the time you need," Sarah said. "But Lewis, opportunities like this don't come often. We believe you could become as famous for acting as you are for racing." The executives packed up their papers and laptops. Before they left, David shook Lewis's hand. "Lewis, I've been in Hollywood for 20 years. I've worked with the biggest stars in the world. You have something special that can't be taught. Don't let fear stop you from exploring it." After they left, Lewis sat alone at the restaurant table. Monaco Harbor sparkled with lights from expensive boats. This was his world: fast cars, luxury, and competition. But maybe there was room for another world too. Lewis walked back to his apartment thinking about the conversation. $50 million to make movies about his own life. Creative control over the scripts. The chance to inspire kids around the world through films instead of just racing. But there was something else that excited Lewis even more than the money or the fame. For the first time in 20 years, he would be learning something completely new. Racing had become natural for him. Acting would be a challenge. Lewis had always loved challenges. In his apartment, Lewis called his dad Anthony. It was late, but Anthony always answered when Lewis called. "Hello, son. How did filming go today?" Lewis almost told his dad everything about Project Mirror and the movie deal. But something stopped him. He wanted to make this decision by himself first. "It went well, Dad. Really well. I think I might be good at this acting thing." Anthony laughed. "Lewis, you've been good at acting since you were little. Remember when you used to perform entire plays for your mother and me? We always wondered if you'd go back to it someday." Lewis smiled. His parents had seen something in him that he had forgotten about himself. "Dad, what would you think if I told you I wanted to try acting professionally? Along with racing, not instead of racing." "Son, I'd think you were brave enough to follow all of your dreams, not just one of them." After they hung up, Lewis stood on his balcony looking out at the Monaco circuit. Tomorrow he would qualify for the Monaco Grand Prix. Sunday he would race for his 8th World Championship. But next winter, he might be in Hollywood making a movie about the little boy from Stevenage who dreamed of being everything. Lewis picked up the Apple Studios contract and read it again. The words looked real. The numbers looked real. The opportunity looked real. But Lewis also knew that signing this contract would change everything about his life. He would become not just a racing driver, but a public figure in a completely different way. Every movie would be watched by millions of people. Every performance would be judged by critics who didn't know anything about racing. Was he ready for that kind of pressure? Was he ready to be judged as an actor instead of just as a driver? Lewis looked at his reflection in the window. He saw a 38-year-old man who had achieved everything possible in racing. But he also saw something else, a person who was ready for the next adventure. Tomorrow he would focus on racing. But tonight, Lewis Hamilton was becoming a movie star. The next morning, Lewis woke up feeling different. The Monaco Grand Prix qualifying session was in 6 hours, but his mind wasn't only thinking about racing. For the first time in his career, something else felt just as important as driving fast. Lewis made his usual breakfast and walked to the Monte Carlo circuit. The streets were packed with more fans than he had ever seen. People were wearing Mercedes shirts with his name, holding signs that said, "Go Lewis," and asking for pictures. But today, Lewis wondered if some of these fans might see him in movies someday. At the Mercedes garage, Lewis put on his racing suit and helmet. His team was ready for qualifying. The car felt perfect during practice yesterday. Lewis had a real chance to win his home race for the 10th time. But as he sat in his car waiting for the session to start, Lewis kept thinking about the Apple Studios contract. $50 million to make movies about his own life. The chance to inspire kids through films instead of just racing. The opportunity to learn something completely new. "Lewis, you ready?" asked Pete Bonington, his race engineer, through the radio. "Ready, Pete," Lewis replied. But part of his mind was still in that restaurant with Sarah Chun and her incredible offer. Lewis drove out onto the Monaco circuit for qualifying. The familiar feeling of speed and precision helped him focus. Through Casino Corner, past the harbor, through the tunnel, Lewis knew every inch of this track by heart. His first qualifying lap was good, but not great. Lewis felt distracted, like part of his brain was somewhere else. This had never happened to him before. Racing had always been the only thing that mattered when he was in the car. "Lewis, you're 3/10 off your best time," Pete said through the radio. "What's going on?" Lewis didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the movie cameras that had filmed him driving yesterday. He was thinking about showing emotions while driving fast. He was thinking about becoming an actor. "Sorry, Pete. I'm focused now." Lewis's next lap was much better. He found his rhythm and pushed the car to its limit. By the end of qualifying, he had earned third position for tomorrow's race. Not pole position, but good enough to fight for the win. After qualifying, Lewis sat in the Mercedes garage taking off his helmet. His teammate, George Russell, walked over with a curious expression. "Lewis, are you okay? You seem different out there today." Lewis looked at George, who was 25 years old, and reminded Lewis of himself when he was young and racing was everything. "George, can I ask you something? Do you ever think about having a career outside of racing?" George laughed. "Are you kidding? Racing is all I've ever wanted to do. Why would I think about anything else?" Lewis nodded. "I used to think the same way." "Used to?" "Lewis, you're still one of the best drivers in the world. You could race for 5 more years if you wanted to." "I know," Lewis said, "but maybe there are other things I could be good at too." George looked confused, but before he could ask more questions, Jerry Bruckheimer walked into the garage with Brad Pitt and the film crew. "Lewis, great qualifying session," Jerry said, with his usual enthusiasm. "Are you ready for our final interview?" Lewis had forgotten about the interview. It was supposed to be the last piece of filming for Brad Pitt's movie. But Lewis now knew it was probably another screen test for Project Mirror. They set up cameras in a quiet area behind the Mercedes garage. Lewis sat across from Brad Pitt, both of them wearing casual clothes. The interview was supposed to be about Lewis giving advice to Brad's character about racing. "So, Lewis," Brad said, reading from note cards, "what would you tell an older driver who's trying to make a comeback? Someone who's afraid he's lost his edge?" Lewis looked directly into Brad's eyes, but he wasn't thinking about Brad's character anymore. He was thinking about his own life and the big decision he had to make. "I would tell him that being afraid means you still care," Lewis said. "If you didn't care about being great, you wouldn't be afraid of failing. Fear can be a good thing if you use it to push yourself harder." Brad nodded. "But what if he's not sure he can compete with younger drivers?" Lewis smiled. "Experience is worth more than people think. Young drivers are fast, but older drivers know how to win. They've learned from their mistakes. They understand pressure. Sometimes wisdom beats pure speed." "Cut," Joseph Kosinski called out. That was perfect. Lewis knew the cameras had captured something real and honest. He had been talking about more than racing. He had been talking about taking risks later in life, about not being afraid to try new things. After the interview, Jerry asked Lewis to walk with him around the Monaco harbor. They found a quiet bench overlooking the water where expensive boats were anchored. "Lewis, I need to tell you something," Jerry said. His voice sounded more serious than usual. "What is it, Jerry?" Jerry looked out at the water for a moment before turning to Lewis. "The Apple Studios executives told me they offered you the Project Mirror deal last night." Lewis nodded. "They did. And What did you think? Lewis was quiet for a moment. He had been wondering when Jerry would bring this up. It's an incredible opportunity. But I'm curious about something, Jerry. How long have you known about Project Mirror? Jerry's face changed. He looked uncomfortable and a little sad. Lewis, I need to be completely honest with you. I've known about Project Mirror since the beginning. Lewis felt his stomach tighten. What do you mean since the beginning? The phone call I made to you 4 months ago in Monaco. That call wasn't really about needing your help with Brad's movie. I mean, we did need your help. But the real reason I called was because Apple Studios asked me to. Lewis stared at Jerry. You mean everything has been planned from the start? Jerry nodded slowly. Apple Studios wanted to test you for Project Mirror. They needed a way to bring you to Hollywood without you knowing what they were really doing. Brad's F1 movie was the perfect cover story. Lewis felt a mix of emotions, surprise, anger, but also strange relief. So when you said Brad Pitt specifically asked for me, that part was true, Jerry said quickly. Brad really did want you for the movie. But Apple Studios had already decided they wanted to test you for Project Mirror. Everything worked out perfectly. Lewis stood up from the bench and walked to the harbor railing. Below him, the Mediterranean Sea sparkled in the afternoon sun. Monaco looked beautiful, but Lewis felt like his whole world had shifted. Jerry, why didn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning? Jerry joined Lewis at the railing. Because we weren't sure it would work. We didn't know if you could act. We didn't know if you would be interested. And honestly, we didn't know if you would say yes to being secretly tested. Lewis thought about this. Jerry was probably right. For months ago, if someone had called and said, we want to secretly film you for months to see if you can be a movie star, Lewis probably would have said no. But now you know I can act, Lewis said. Now we know you're extraordinary, Jerry replied. Lewis, I've been making movies for 40 years. I've worked with the biggest stars in the world. You have something special that most actors spend their whole lives trying to develop. Lewis looked at Jerry's face. He could see that Jerry was being honest now, maybe for the first time since they met. Jerry, can I ask you one more thing? Anything. Do. You think I should take the deal? Jerry was quiet for a long moment. Lewis, that's not my decision to make. But I will say this. You have a gift for making people believe in what you're doing. Whether you're racing or acting, you make people feel something real. That's rare. They walked back to the circuit together. Lewis had qualifying for tomorrow's race to think about, but his mind was spinning with everything Jerry had told him. The whole thing had been planned from the beginning. Apple Studios had wanted him before they even knew if he could act. They had taken a huge risk bringing him to Hollywood based on nothing but potential. Now Lewis had to decide if he was brave enough to take the same kind of risk. Lewis had 1 week to make the biggest decision of his life. The Monaco Grand Prix was over. He had finished second after a thrilling race, just missing the win by 3 seconds. But racing felt different now. For the first time, winning wasn't the only thing that mattered to Lewis. Back in his Monaco apartment, Lewis spread the Apple Studios contract across his dining table. $50 million for 3 movies. Creative control over the scripts. The chance to tell his story to the world. It looked real on paper, but it still felt like a dream. Lewis picked up his phone and called the people he trusted most. First, he called his trainer Angela Cullen, who had worked with him for 8 years. Angela, if I told you I was thinking about becoming an actor, what would you say? Angela laughed. Lewis, I've watched you handle pressure that would break most people. I've seen you perform under impossible circumstances. Acting is just another kind of performance. If you want to do it, you can do it. But what about racing? What if acting makes me lose focus on driving? Lewis, you've won 7 world championships. You have nothing left to prove in racing. Maybe it's time to prove something to yourself in a different area. Next, Lewis called his teammate George Russell. George was surprised by the question. You want to be in movies? Lewis, that's crazy, but also kind of cool. Will you still race for Mercedes? That's the plan, Lewis said. Both careers at the same time. If anyone can do 2 things at once and be great at both, it's you, George said. Just don't forget about us when you're famous in Hollywood. Lewis smiled. George reminded him why he loved his Mercedes team so much. They believed in him no matter what. The hardest call was to his mom, Carmen. She had sacrificed so much for his racing career, working extra jobs to pay for go-karts and travel expenses. What would she think about him adding acting to his life? Mom, I need to tell you about something that's been happening. Lewis explained everything. The secret filming, Project Mirror, the movie offer. Carmen listened quietly without interrupting. Louis, do you remember when you were 10 years old and you performed that play at school? You were so proud afterward. You came home and said, "Mom, I want to make people feel things through stories." Louis had forgotten about that. I said that. You did, and then you discovered racing and forgot about acting. But maybe you never really forgot. Maybe you just put it aside until the right time. Carmen's words hit Louis like a lightning bolt. He had forgotten about wanting to make people feel things through stories. Racing made people feel excitement and inspiration. But movies could make people feel hope, courage, and dreams. What do you think I should do, Mom? I think you should follow your heart. You've always been brave enough to chase impossible dreams. Don't stop now. After talking to his family and friends, Louis decided to visit the places that had shaped his life. Maybe seeing his past would help him decide his future. He flew to England and drove to Stevenage, his hometown. The small town looked exactly the same as when he left 18 years ago. Louis parked outside his old house on Peartree Way. The new owners had painted it a different color, but it was still the same small house where he grew up. Louis walked to his old primary school, Peartree Spring Junior School. It was summer vacation, so the building was empty. But Louis could see through the windows to the classroom where he first acted in plays. He remembered his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who was 65 years old now. Louis had heard she still lived in Stevenage. He found her address and knocked on her door. Mrs. Patterson opened the door and immediately recognized him. Louis Hamilton. My goodness, look at you. A world champion. They sat in her small living room drinking tea. The walls were covered with pictures of students she had taught over the years, including a photo of 10-year-old Louis in a school play. Mrs. Patterson, do you remember what I was like as a student? Oh, Louis, you were special. Very smart, very determined. But what I remember most was your acting. You could make the whole classroom believe you were someone else. You had a gift for making people feel emotions. Louis looked at the photo of himself at age 10. He was wearing a costume and smiling with pure joy. Do you think I could have been an actor if I hadn't chosen racing? Mrs. Patterson studied Louis's face carefully. Louis, I think you could have been anything you wanted to be. But the real question is, what do you want to be now? Louis left Mrs. Patterson's house feeling more confused than before. He had hoped visiting his past would make the decision easier. Instead, it reminded him that he had always had multiple talents and dreams. That evening, Louis drove to the go-kart track where he first learned to race. Rye House Kart Circuit was where 8-year-old Louis fell in love with speed. His dad Anthony had brought him here every weekend for years. Louis walked around the small track alone. He could almost see his younger self driving those first go-karts, dreaming of Formula One. That little boy had achieved everything he wanted in racing. Maybe it was time for new dreams. Louis sat on a bench overlooking the track and called his dad Anthony. Dad, I'm at Rye House. Remember bringing me here when I was 8? Of course I remember. You were so small you could barely reach the pedals. But you had this look in your eyes, like you knew you were born to race. Dad, what if I told you I was thinking about trying acting professionally, while still racing, not instead of racing? Anthony was quiet for a moment. Son, do you want my honest opinion? Always. I think you've been racing for 30 years. You've won everything there is to win. You've proven you're the best driver in history. Maybe it's time to prove you can be great at something else too. But what if I fail? What if I'm terrible at acting? Anthony laughed. Louis, you've never been terrible at anything you really wanted to do. And besides, you're already successful. You can afford to take risks now. What do you mean? When you were 8 years old racing go-karts, we had to risk everything just to keep you racing. We sold the house. I worked 3 jobs. Your mom took extra shifts. We had to risk failure because we had no choice. Louis remembered those difficult years when money was always a problem. But now, Anthony continued, you have enough success and money to try new things without risking everything. You can follow dreams just because they're dreams, not because you have to. Louis felt tears in his eyes. His dad was right. When he was young, Louis had to succeed at racing because his family had sacrificed everything for it. Now he could try acting simply because he wanted to, not because he needed to. Thanks, Dad. I think I know what I want to do. Louis spent one more day in England, visiting the Mercedes Formula One factory in Brackley. He sat in the racing simulator and drove a perfect lap around Monaco. The simulator felt incredibly real, but Lewis knew it wasn't the same as being in a real race car. But as he drove the simulated lap, Lewis realized something important. Racing would always be part of him. Even if he spent months making movies, he could always come back to racing. The skills and knowledge would never leave him. Acting was different. If Lewis didn't try it now, he might never get another chance. Apple Studios might not wait forever. Other actors might get the roles. The opportunity might disappear. Lewis got out of the simulator and made his decision. He was going to say yes to Project Mirror. Lewis was going to become a movie star while staying a racing champion. He was going to follow both of his dreams at the same time. For the first time in his life, Lewis Hamilton was going to do something just because he wanted to, not because he had to. And that felt like the most freedom he had ever experienced. Lewis called Sarah Chun from Apple Studios the next morning. He was back in Monaco, sitting on his balcony with a cup of tea and the contract in front of him. The Mediterranean Sea sparkled in the morning sun, and Lewis felt more excited than nervous. "Sarah, this is Lewis Hamilton. I've made my decision about Project Mirror." "Lewis, we've been hoping to hear from you. What have you decided?" Lewis looked at the contract one more time. $50 million. 3 movies about his own life. The chance to inspire millions of people through films instead of just racing. "I want to do it. I'm saying yes to Project Mirror." Sarah's voice exploded with excitement. "Lewis, that's incredible. We are thrilled. This is going to be the most amazing partnership. I have some questions about how this will work with my racing schedule," Lewis said. "Of course. We've already worked that out. The first movie will film during your winter break between December and February. If you're still racing next season, we'll schedule the other movies around your F1 calendar." Lewis felt relieved. He could chase both dreams without giving up either one. "When do we start?" Lewis asked. "How does next week sound? We want to fly you back to Los Angeles to meet with our screenwriters and directors. We'll start planning the first movie immediately." 2 days later, Lewis was on a plane back to Los Angeles. But this time felt completely different from his first trip to Hollywood 5 months ago. This time, he wasn't Lewis Hamilton helping other people make movies. He was Lewis Hamilton, the movie star. The news leaked to the press before Lewis landed. At LAX, his phone buzzed with text messages from friends and family. News websites had headlines like "Lewis Hamilton signs $50 million movie deal" and "F1 champion becomes Hollywood star." At the airport, even more paparazzi were waiting than before. "Lewis, are you really making movies about your life?" they shouted. "Will you quit racing? Who's going to play your dad?" Lewis smiled and waved, but didn't stop to answer questions. He had learned from watching Brad Pitt that movie stars could be friendly without telling everyone their business. Miguel picked him up in the same black Mercedes as always. "Congratulations, Mr. Hamilton. You're a movie star now." "Thanks, Miguel. It doesn't feel real yet." "Oh, it's real. I've been driving movie stars for 20 years. You have that look now, like someone who's about to become famous in a whole new way." Apple Studios had rented Lewis a bigger apartment in Beverly Hills for his movie work. It had a swimming pool, a home theater, and a view of the Hollywood sign. Lewis looked around the apartment and laughed. 6 months ago, he was just a racing driver visiting Hollywood for a few days. Now he lived here. That afternoon, Lewis met with the Project Mirror team at Apple Studios headquarters in Cupertino. The building was modern and white, full of people, working on iPhones and computers. But Lewis was there for something completely different. In a conference room, 10 people sat around a large table covered with notebooks, laptops, and coffee cups. Sarah Chun introduced everyone: screenwriters, producers, costume designers, and casting directors. "Lewis, welcome to the Project Mirror family," Sarah said. "These are the people who will help tell your story to the world." The head screenwriter was named Elena Rodriguez. She had written movies about real people before, including a film about a famous soccer player. "Lewis, I've been studying your life for 6 months. Your story is incredible, but I want to hear it from you. What parts of your childhood do you think are most important?" Lewis thought about growing up in Stevenage. "The most important part was my family never giving up on me, even when we had no money. My dad sold our house to buy better go-karts. My mom worked extra jobs to pay for racing travel. They believed in my dreams before I even knew what my dreams were." Elena wrote notes quickly. "What about the difficult parts? The racism you faced as the only black driver in karting?" Lewis felt his stomach tighten. Those memories were painful. When I was 8 years old, other kids at the track called me names. Their parents sometimes said I didn't belong there. But my dad taught me to let my driving do the talking. Those scenes will be hard to film, Elena said gently. But they're important. People need to see what you overcame. Lewis nodded. He wanted the movie to be honest, even about the painful parts. The casting director, James Park, opened his laptop. Lewis, we need to find actors to play your family. Do you have any thoughts about who should play your parents? Lewis had never thought about this. I want actors who can show how much my parents sacrificed. It wasn't easy for them, but they never complained. James showed Lewis photos of different actors. For his dad, Anthony, they suggested actors like Idris Elba and John Boyega. For his mom, Carmen, they suggested Lupita Nyong'o and Denai Gurira. These are all incredible actors, Lewis said. But I want whoever we choose to spend time with my real parents. They need to understand what Anthony and Carmen are really like. The costume designer, Maria Santos, spread out sketches of racing suits and casual clothes. Lewis, we want to recreate your exact go-karts and racing suits from when you were young. Do you have any photos or equipment we could copy? Lewis smiled. My dad saved everything. We have my first racing suit, my first helmet, even my first trophy. They're all in storage at my parents' house. After 4 hours of meetings, Lewis felt exhausted but excited. Making a movie was like building a race car. Hundreds of people working together to create something perfect. That evening, Jerry Bruckheimer took Lewis to dinner at a fancy restaurant in Beverly Hills. Brad Pitt joined them, along with Joseph Kosinski. Lewis, I have to say, I'm jealous, Brad said with a smile. You get to play yourself in your own life story. That's every actor's dream. I'm nervous about it, Lewis admitted. You make acting look easy, but I know it's not. The good news is you already know the character, Joseph said. You've been Lewis Hamilton your whole life. Now you just have to show other people what that feels like. Jerry raised his wine glass. To Lewis Hamilton, racing champion, movie star, and proof that dreams can come true at any age. They clinked glasses, and Lewis felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the wine. 6 months ago, he was just a racing driver. Now he was surrounded by some of the most famous people in Hollywood, and they were treating him like family. Jerry, can I ask you something? Lewis said, do you really think I can do this? Be good at acting, I mean. Jerry looked serious. Lewis, I've been making movies for 40 years. I can usually tell within 5 minutes if someone has what it takes to be a movie star. You had it from the moment you walked into our studio. What is it exactly? It's the ability to make people believe in what you're doing. When you race, people believe you're the fastest driver in the world. When you act, people will believe you're whoever you're playing. That's a gift you can't teach. Lewis felt confidence growing inside him. Maybe Jerry was right. Maybe Lewis really could be good at this. After dinner, Lewis walked alone through Beverly Hills. The streets were lined with palm trees and expensive cars. Movie theaters showed films with actors Lewis now knew personally. This was his world now, at least part-time. Lewis thought about the 10-year-old boy in Stevenage who used to act out movie scenes in his bedroom mirror. That boy had dreamed of being in real movies someday. Tomorrow, Lewis would start making that boy's dream come true. But Lewis also thought about the 8-year-old boy who fell in love with go-kart racing at Rye House. That boy's dreams had already come true. 7 world championships, 103 race wins, and recognition as one of the greatest drivers in history. For the first time in his life, Lewis Hamilton was living 2 dreams at the same time. And both dreams felt perfect. 6 months later, Lewis stood on a movie set in London that looked exactly like his childhood home in Stevenage. Apple Studios had spent millions of dollars recreating Peartree Way down to every detail. The street signs, the houses, even the small corner shop where Lewis used to buy candy. Everything was perfect. Project Mirror, the beginning, was finally filming. Lewis wore the same type of clothes he used to wear as a child, a simple t-shirt and jeans. But now there were cameras everywhere, capturing every moment of his story. The hardest part was playing himself as a 10-year-old boy learning to race. Lewis had to remember exactly how it felt to be that small boy with giant dreams and no money to make them come true. Lewis, in this scene you're telling your parents you want to race in Formula One, director Elena Rodriguez explained. But you're only 10 years old, so it sounds impossible. Show us that child's pure belief that anything can happen. Lewis looked at the actors playing his parents. Idris Elba was playing Anthony Hamilton, and he had spent weeks with Lewis's real dad learning how to copy his voice and movements. Lupita Nyong'o was playing Carmen, and she had mastered his mom's warm smile and caring eyes. Action! Elena called out. Lewis sat at the kitchen table that looked exactly like the one from his real childhood. Dad, I'm going to race in Formula One someday and become world champion. Idris, playing Anthony, looked at Lewis with the same mixture of love and worry that Lewis remembered from his real father. Son, Formula One costs millions of pounds. We don't have that kind of money. I know, Dad, but I'll find a way. I have to. Lupita, playing Carmen, reached over and touched Lewis's hand. Lewis, dreams are important, but they have to be realistic. Lewis looked directly into the camera with the pure confidence he remembered feeling as a child. This dream is realistic, Mom. I can feel it. Cut. Perfect. Elena shouted. Lewis wiped tears from his eyes. Acting out his real childhood memories was more emotional than he expected. He was reliving the most important moments of his life, but this time millions of people would watch them. The young actor playing Lewis at age 10 was named Marcus Thompson. He was 11 years old and from Stevenage, just like Lewis. Marcus had never acted in a movie before, but he was naturally good at it. Lewis, can you teach me how to sit in a go-kart like a real racer? Marcus asked during a break between scenes. Lewis smiled. Marcus reminded him of himself at that age, curious, determined, and fearless. Of course, but remember, in the movie you're not a good driver yet. You're just learning. They filmed scenes of young Lewis at Rye House Kart Circuit. Apple Studios had rented the entire track for 2 weeks. Lewis watched Marcus drive his first movie go-kart lap, and it looked exactly like Lewis's real first lap 30 years ago. A little scary, but full of potential. How does it feel watching someone else play you as a child? Asked Rebecca Martinez, a reporter from Entertainment Weekly who was visiting the set. Lewis thought about the question. Strange but good. It's like watching my memories come to life. Sometimes I forget it's acting and think I'm really watching my younger self. The most difficult scene to film was about racism. When Lewis was 8 years old, other kids at the karting track had called him names and made him feel like he didn't belong. Lewis had never talked about these experiences in detail before, but the movie needed to show them. Lewis, this scene is going to be hard to watch, Elena warned him. Are you sure you want to include it? Lewis nodded. People need to see what really happened. Kids who face the same problems today need to know they're not alone. They filmed the scene at a go-kart track outside London. Marcus, playing young Lewis, was the only black child among 20 white kids. Some of the child actors had to say mean things to Marcus, which made everyone on set feel uncomfortable. You don't belong here, one child actor said to Marcus. Go-karting is not for people like you. Marcus looked sad and confused, just like Lewis had felt 30 years ago. But then the actor playing Anthony stepped in. My son belongs anywhere. He wants to be, Idris said with fierce protection in his voice. And he's going to prove it by being better than all of you. Lewis watched from behind the cameras and felt tears running down his face. He remembered that exact moment from his real childhood. His dad had always protected him and believed in him, even when other people didn't. Cut. Elena called out. That was incredibly powerful. After filming that scene, Lewis hugged Marcus. That was hard, wasn't it? Marcus nodded, but it felt important, like we were telling people something they need to hear. Lewis realized that Marcus understood what the movie was really about. It wasn't just entertainment. It was about showing people that dreams can come true even when the world seems against you. During lunch breaks, Lewis's real parents Anthony and Carmen visited the set. It was strange for them to watch actors playing themselves, but they were proud of how the movie honored their family's story. Lewis, I never knew acting could look so much like real life, Anthony said as he watched Idris practice his scenes. That man moves exactly like me. Carmen laughed as she watched Lupita. She even holds her teacup the same way I do. It's like looking in a mirror. The movie also showed how much Lewis's parents had sacrificed for his racing career. There were scenes of Anthony working 3 jobs to pay for go-karts. There were scenes of Carmen sewing Lewis's racing suits by hand because they couldn't afford to buy new ones. I want people to understand that my success belongs to my whole family, Lewis told Elena. My parents gave up everything so I could chase my dreams. After 2 months of filming in England, the movie team moved to other locations. They filmed racing scenes at real go-kart tracks where Lewis had competed as a child. They filmed at the McLaren Technology Center where Lewis signed his first Formula One contract. The final scene of the movie was Lewis winning his first go-kart championship at age 13. Marcus had been taking driving lessons for months to prepare for this scene. When he crossed the finish line in first place, the whole film crew cheered. That's a wrap on Project Mirror, the beginning, Elena announced. Lewis felt a mix of sadness and excitement. Filming was over, but now the real work began. The movie would be edited, music would be added, and special effects would be created. In 6 months, people around the world would see Lewis Hamilton's story on the big screen. Brad Pitt visited the set on the last day of filming. He was finishing his own F1 movie, which would come out a few months before Lewis's movie. "Lewis, I watched some of your scenes yesterday," Brad said. "You're not just acting, you're channeling something real and powerful. This movie is going to change people's lives." "Do you really think so?" Lewis asked. "I know so. Your story shows that impossible dreams can become reality if you work hard enough and never give up. That's a message the world needs right now." That evening, Lewis sat in his hotel room in London looking at photos from the filming. Pictures of him with Marcus, with his parents, with the incredible cast and crew who had become like family. Lewis thought about the journey from that first phone call from Jerry Bruckheimer to this moment. He had started as a racing driver helping other people make movies. Now he was a movie star telling his own story to the world. But the most amazing part was that Lewis was still racing too. In 3 weeks, he would be back in his Mercedes race car competing for another world championship. He wasn't choosing between his dreams anymore. He was living all of them at the same time. Lewis picked up his phone and called his dad, Anthony. "Dad, we finished filming today. How do you feel, son?" Lewis looked out his hotel window at the London skyline. Somewhere in this city was the boy he used to be, dreaming impossible dreams in a small house in Stevenage. "I feel like that 10-year-old kid who told you he was going to be a Formula One champion," Lewis said. "Except now I'm 39 years old, and I'm still making impossible dreams come true." Anthony laughed. "Some people never grow out of believing in magic, Lewis. You're one of those people, and that's why your story is going to inspire millions of others to believe in magic too." Lewis Hamilton had become exactly what he dreamed of as a child. Not just a racing champion, but someone who could make people believe that anything was possible. 2 months after filming wrapped, Lewis was back at the Apple Studios lot in Los Angeles for the final editing of Project Mirror, the beginning. The movie would premiere in theaters worldwide in just 3 months. Lewis felt nervous and excited as he walked into the editing room. Elena Rodriguez, the director, was sitting at a computer with multiple screens showing different scenes from the movie. "Lewis, perfect timing. We just finished putting together the final cut. Are you ready to see your life story?" Lewis sat down in a comfortable chair facing the largest screen. "I think so. This feels surreal. Before we watch, I want to show you something special," Elena said with a mysterious smile. "Sarah Chen asked me to save this for today." Sarah Chen walked into the editing room carrying a small box. She looked more serious than usual, like she was about to share something important. "Lewis, there's something we never told you about Project Mirror. Something that makes this story even more incredible than you know." Lewis felt confused. "What do you mean?" Sarah sat down next to Lewis and opened the box. Inside was an old VHS tape with a handwritten label that said, "For Lewis, 2003. 21 years ago, your father Anthony sent this videotape to every major movie studio in Hollywood, including Apple Studios. We've kept it all this time, waiting for the right moment to show it to you." Lewis stared at the tape. He had never seen it before. "What's on it?" "Your father's dream for your future. But not just racing. A bigger dream that he saw in you before you even saw it in yourself." Sarah put the tape into an old VHS player. The screen flickered and then showed a younger version of Lewis's dad, Anthony, sitting in their kitchen in Stevenage. Anthony looked about 40 years old, the same age Lewis was now. "My name is Anthony Hamilton," the video began. "I'm calling from Stevenage, England. My son Lewis is 18 years old, and he's going to be the greatest racing driver in the world. But that's not his biggest dream." Lewis felt his heart stop. His father had made this video when Lewis was just starting his racing career. But Anthony was talking about dreams Lewis didn't even know he had yet. Lewis has always been special, Anthony continued on the tape. Not just because he's fast in a race car. He's special because he wants to make the world better. He wants to tell stories that help people believe in themselves. Lewis watched his young father speak with such confidence and love. Dad knew this about me when I was 18. Keep watching, Sarah said gently. On the tape, Anthony held up photos of young Lewis acting in school plays. Before Lewis discovered racing, he loved acting. He would perform entire plays in our living room. His mother Carmen and I would watch him become different characters, and we knew he had a gift for making people feel things. Lewis remembered those childhood performances, but he had forgotten how much his parents supported his acting. Racing had taken over his whole life. I'm sending this video to movie studios because I believe Lewis will want to return to acting. Someday, Anthony said. Maybe after he becomes world champion. Maybe when he's ready to inspire people in a different way. Anthony looked directly into the camera with the same determined expression Lewis had inherited. Lewis doesn't know I'm making this video. He thinks racing is his only dream. But I can see something bigger in him. Someday, Lewis is going to want to tell stories that change people's lives. The video showed Anthony walking around their small house in Stevenage. We don't have money for Hollywood dreams right now. Every penny goes to Lewis's racing. But someday, when he's successful, I want someone to remember that Lewis Hamilton has more to offer the world than just driving fast cars. Lewis felt tears streaming down his face. His father had believed in dreams Lewis didn't even know he had. Anthony had planted seeds for a future Lewis couldn't imagine at 18 years old. There's more, Anthony said on the tape. I want Lewis to make movies that show kids like him that anything is possible. Kids from small towns. Kids without money. Kids who face problems because they're different. Lewis knows what it feels like to overcome impossible obstacles. The video ended with Anthony holding a photo of 18-year-old Lewis in his first Formula One racing suit. Please keep this video safe. Someday, Lewis Hamilton is going to be ready to tell his story to the world. When that day comes, I hope someone will remember that his father always believed in the bigger picture. The screen went black. Lewis sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process what he had just seen. Your father sent this tape to 12 movie studios in 2003, Sarah explained. Most of them threw it away or forgot about it. But Apple Studios kept it. We filed it under future projects and waited. You've been waiting for me for 21 years. Lewis asked in amazement. We've been waiting for you to be ready, Elena said. Your father knew you would need to succeed at racing first. He knew you would need to grow into the person who could handle this kind of opportunity. Lewis thought about everything that had happened since 2003. 7 world championships, global fame, millions of dollars, the confidence to take risks, the platform to inspire people. His father had seen all of this coming when Lewis was just a teenager. But how did you know when I was ready? Lewis asked. Sarah smiled. We didn't. You told us. When Jerry Bruckheimer called you about Brad Pitt's F1 movie, you said yes immediately. You were excited about cameras and storytelling. You had questions about acting. That's when we knew Anthony Hamilton had been right about his son's bigger dreams. Lewis realized that his entire journey to Hollywood had been orchestrated by his father's love and vision. Not just the past year of Project Mirror, but the past 21 years of preparation. Does my dad know you kept his video? Lewis asked. He does now, Sarah said. I called him yesterday and told him we were going to show it to you today. He said it was about time you knew the truth. Lewis pulled out his phone and called his dad immediately. Anthony answered on the first ring. Dad, I just watched your video from 2003. Why didn't you ever tell me about it? Anthony's voice was warm and proud. Because you weren't ready to hear it, son. You needed to become a champion first. You needed to prove to yourself that impossible dreams can come true. But Dad, you believed in my Hollywood dreams before. I even had them. Lewis, I believed in you. All of you. The racing driver, the actor, the leader, the inspiration. I could see everything you were going to become, even when you could only see the next race. Lewis felt overwhelmed by his father's faith and patience. How did you know I would want to make movies someday? Because I know your heart, son. You've always wanted to help people believe in themselves. Racing was one way to do that. Movies are another way. I knew that someday you would be ready for both. After they hung up, Lewis sat quietly in the editing room. Sarah and Elena watched him process everything he had learned. "This changes everything," Lewis said finally. "This whole journey wasn't just about Apple Studios taking a chance on me. It was about my father creating opportunities for dreams I didn't even know I had." "Your father planted a seed," Elena said, "but you're the one who grew it into something beautiful." Sarah opened her laptop and showed Lewis the marketing materials for Project Mirror, the beginning. Movie posters with Lewis's face, trailers, playing on websites around the world, theater bookings in 50 countries. "Lewis, because of your father's vision and your courage, millions of people are going to see your story. Kids who think their dreams are impossible are going to watch you overcome every obstacle. They're going to believe that they can do the same thing." Lewis looked at the movie poster showing him as a child in Stevenage and him now as a world champion and movie star. "Dad saw all of this coming when I was 18 years old. He saw the potential," Elena said, "but you made it real." That evening, Lewis called his mom Carmen and told her about the video. She cried when she heard about Anthony's 21-year plan. "Your father never stopped believing in all of your dreams," Carmen said. "Even the ones you forgot about. Even the ones you didn't know you had yet." Lewis realized this moment was the real climax of his story. Not signing the movie contract, not filming the movie, but discovering that his journey to Hollywood had begun with his father's love 21 years ago. Lewis Hamilton hadn't just become a movie star. He had fulfilled a destiny that was planned by the person who loved him most. A destiny based on faith, patience, and the belief that one person's story could inspire millions of others to dream bigger. Tomorrow, Lewis would return to Formula One racing for the final races of the season. But tonight, he understood that his father had always seen the complete picture of his life. Racing champion, movie star, inspiration to the world. The secret that changed everything wasn't about Project Mirror or Apple Studios. The secret was about a father's love creating opportunities for his son's future, even dreams the son couldn't imagine. Yet 3 months later, Lewis stood on the red carpet at the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood. Thousands of fans lined the street, holding signs that said, "We believe in Lewis, and dreams come true." Camera flashes lit up the evening sky as reporters shouted questions about his movie and racing career. Tonight was the world premiere of Project Mirror, the beginning. Lewis wore a custom black suit designed by his favorite fashion house. But more important than how he looked was how he felt: proud, grateful, and amazed at how far he had come. His parents Anthony and Carmen walked beside him on the red carpet. Anthony wore his first tuxedo ever, and Carmen had on a beautiful gold dress. They looked nervous but excited to be at their son's movie premiere. "Lewis, how does it feel to see your life story on the big screen?" a reporter from CNN asked. Lewis stopped and smiled into the camera. "It feels like a dream I didn't know I was allowed to have. This movie shows that no dream is too big if you have people who believe in you." Behind Lewis, Brad Pitt and Jerry Bruckheimer posed for photos. Brad's F1 movie had been a huge success 2 months earlier, and now Lewis's movie was expected to be even bigger. "Lewis," called out a young girl from the crowd, "will you still race cars now that you're a movie star?" Lewis walked over to the barrier and knelt down to talk to the girl. She was about 10 years old and wore a Mercedes racing shirt with his number 44. "What's your name?" Lewis asked. "Sophie. I want to be a racing driver like you, but my friends say girls can't be F1 champions." Lewis looked into Sophie's eyes and saw the same determination he had felt as a child. "Sophie, I used to think I couldn't be a movie star because I was just a racing driver. But I learned that you can be anything you dream of being. Don't let anyone tell you what's impossible." Sophie smiled and hugged Lewis. As he walked away, Lewis realized this was why his father had made that video 21 years ago. Not just so Lewis could become famous, but so he could inspire kids like Sophie to believe in their own impossible dreams. Inside the theater, Lewis sat between his parents as the lights dimmed. He had seen parts of the movie during editing, but this was the first time he would watch the complete story from beginning to end. The movie opened with 10-year-old Lewis, played by Marcus Thompson, telling his parents he wanted to race in Formula One. Lewis watched his childhood unfold on the huge screen. The struggles with money, the racism at karting tracks, his parents' sacrifices, and his determination to never give up. When the movie showed Anthony working 3 jobs to pay for Lewis's racing, Lewis reached over and squeezed his dad's hand. Anthony squeezed back, and Lewis saw tears in his father's eyes. The most powerful scene was when young Lewis faced cruel comments from other kids at the racetrack. Marcus Thompson's performance was so real that the entire theater fell silent. Then, when the movie showed Anthony defending his son and promising that Lewis would prove himself through racing, the audience applauded. Lewis watched his real mom, Carmen, crying as she saw Lupita Nyong'o recreate moments from their family's life. "It's like watching our memories come to life," Carmen whispered. The movie ended with 13-year-old Lewis winning his first major go-kart championship. As Marcus crossed the finish line on screen, the theater erupted in cheers and applause. That lasted for 5 minutes. When the credits rolled, Lewis stood up and faced the audience. 2,000 people, movie stars, racing drivers, business leaders, and fans, gave him a standing ovation. "Thank you," Lewis said into the microphone. On stage, "This movie isn't just about me. It's about everyone who believes that dreams can come true against all odds. It's about parents who sacrifice everything for their children's futures. And it's about never giving up, even when the world tells you to quit." Lewis looked at his parents in the front row. Most of all, this movie is about love. The love that creates opportunities we never imagined. The love that sees potential before we see it ourselves. The love that waits patiently for dreams to grow into reality. After the premiere, Lewis and his family went to the after-party at a fancy hotel in Beverly Hills. The room was filled with the biggest names in Hollywood and Formula One. But Lewis spent most of the evening talking to young people who had come. To the premiere, a 16-year-old boy named David approached Lewis. "I saw your movie tonight, and it changed my perspective on everything. I want to be a filmmaker, but my family doesn't have money for film school." Lewis listened to David's story and remembered his own childhood when money was always a problem. "David, talent and determination matter more than money. Start making films with your phone. Put them online. Work harder than everyone else. The opportunities will come." Lewis gave David his personal phone number. "Call me in 6 months and tell me about the films you've made. I want to see your work." A 12-year-old girl named Aisha told Lewis she wanted to be both a scientist and an artist. "Everyone says I have to pick one," she said sadly. "I used to think I could only be a racing driver," Lewis replied. "Now I'm a racing driver and a movie star. You can be a scientist and an artist. You can be anything you work hard enough to become." As the party wound down, Lewis found himself alone on a balcony overlooking Los Angeles. The city sparkled with millions of lights, each one representing someone's dreams and struggles. Sarah Chun from Apple Studios joined him on the balcony. "Lewis, I have some news. The movie is tracking to be one of the biggest opening weekends in history. Early reviews are incredible. People are calling it inspirational masterpiece and the movie that proves dreams come true." Lewis felt amazed, but not surprised. It's a good story. It's more than that. It's proof that one person's journey can inspire millions of others. We're already getting calls from parents around the world saying their kids watched the trailer and started believing in bigger dreams. Lewis thought about Sophie, the 10-year-old girl who wanted to race cars, and David, the teenager who wanted to make films, and Aisha, who wanted to be a scientist and artist. "Sarah, I want to do something with the money from this movie. I want to start a foundation that helps kids pursue impossible dreams. Racing lessons, acting classes, film equipment, science camps, whatever they need to chase their biggest goals." Sarah smiled. "That's perfect, Lewis. Your father would be proud." Lewis looked through the balcony windows at his parents talking with Brad Pitt and Jerry Bruckheimer. Anthony was showing Brad photos from Lewis's childhood, and Brad was listening with genuine interest. Lewis realized that everything had come full circle. The little boy from Stevenage who dreamed of racing cars and acting in movies had grown up to become both. More importantly, he had become someone who could help other kids believe in their own impossible dreams. His phone buzzed with a text message from his old teacher, Mrs. Patterson. "Lewis, I just watched your movie premiere on television. That 10-year-old boy who used to act in my classroom has become exactly what I always knew he could be. Someone who makes the world believe in magic." Lewis smiled and typed back, "Thank you for believing in the magic before I even knew it existed." As Lewis looked out at the Los Angeles skyline, he thought about tomorrow. In 2 days, he would fly back to England for the final Formula One races of the season. he was still fighting for another world championship. Racing remained his first love and greatest passion, but now Lewis also had a second career that filled his heart with different kind of joy. Making movies allowed him to inspire people in ways that racing couldn't. Acting let him tell stories that could change lives. Lewis Hamilton had become exactly what his father envisioned 21 years ago, not just a racing champion, but a storyteller who could make people believe that anything was possible. The secret that changed everything wasn't about fame or money or Hollywood glamour. The secret was about a father's love that could see the future and plant seeds for dreams that wouldn't bloom for decades. Lewis had learned that the most powerful force in the world wasn't speed or talent or determination. The most powerful force was love that believed in possibilities before they existed. As he walked back into the party to celebrate with his family and friends, Lewis Hamilton knew that his greatest victory wasn't any championship or movie success. His greatest victory was becoming the person his father always knew he could be. Someone who used his gifts to help others believe in the magic of impossible dreams. The boy from Stevenage had conquered 2 worlds and was just getting started. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. It's amazing to connect with people from all around the world who believe in the power of dreams. If this story inspired you or made you believe that your own impossible dreams might be possible, please give this video a thumbs up. Your likes help us know which stories touch your hearts the most. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories like this one. We share amazing journeys of people who refused to give up on their dreams, overcame impossible odds, and changed their lives in ways they never thought possible. And please, share this video with your friends and family. In a world that sometimes feels divided, stories like Lewis Hamilton's remind us that kindness, determination, and believing in each other can create magic. When we spread these positive stories, we spread hope and awareness that anything is truly possible. Thank you for listening. And remember, your dreams are never too big if you have the courage to chase them. Until next time, keep believing in the impossible.